All right, good morning. Man, sometimes weekends feel like they fly, don't they? And well, we had a great weekend. I love my weekends, and things were good for us, man. Friday, finished building my little wall I've got working on in the front, trying to ease our workload of just grass and all that. Really, but anyway, great time doing that. And then hanging out with the Tamster Friday night, Saturday, did a little walking, did a lot of walking. And then with the Tamster was fun, and then hung out with some old friends. Man, what a great time! I always have this statement that when I think about my old friends, you can't make old friends. So if you got friends, you've had them for a long time, keep them. And there's just something legend about that. And so did that and watched a little ball and had a great evening. And yesterday, church, man, was incredible. I mean, I'm just telling you, it was. We were looking at the book of the Revelation, and yesterday it's a letter. I mean, we tend to think of it as all this stuff, but at the core of it, it's a letter. It's an apocalyptic, prophetic letter, but it's a letter nonetheless to some churches, real churches. And so we looked at one yesterday, and just convicting in a very good way yesterday. So we did that, and then hung out with Jackson and Rachel, and man, just a great day, and looking forward to all this going on this weekend. Who knows what kind of trouble we're going to get into, what kind of things we're going to find to do. But we are finishing up a topic about widows today. And so that's where we find ourselves, and get to my scriptures, and then we're going to jump into it. Somehow I think I lost my scriptures, so hang on just one second. But we're in 1 Timothy 5, and I want us to see what's going on. He's in a series where he's just kind of talking about the household of God, and he went through a list of how you deal with sinful people, and you treat the older ones. He's telling Timothy as a father, you treat the younger ones as brothers, you teach the women as your mother. It kind of, you treat them. That's how you treat them when you're dealing with life. And then he begins to talk in terms of a class of widows. So apparently in the church in Ephesus, there were women that were lots of widows, enough to be concerned with. Now, so it's an established church, and whether due to persecution, due to just the life and the hardship of it there was a concern of what are we going to do with all of these widows that we have. And so we've been working our way through that. So this will be now our third kind of a section in this. And so I'm going to read, and we'll just remember ourselves. The first one we looked at was verse 3 and 4. We just said, take care of mama, right? He says, give proper recognition to those widows who are really in need, right? So you've got widows. There's lots of widows, but not every one of them has legitimate hardcore needs that need to be dealt with from a financial, physical standpoint. But he says, give honor to those widows who are widows who really have need. Or recognition. But if a widow has children or grandchildren, these should learn, first of all, to put their religion into practice by caring for their own family. So first thing he says, and God builds a great care for women, always has. The scriptures, above all else, no matter what you think about it, has elevated women to a very healthy status. I know people want to read into it and say it's all about downgrading women and everything else. It's really not. It's about honoring who they are at the core, and understanding how they are wired by the Creator. And so he's always had women that were to be cared for, to be provided for. It's just part and parcel of the church. He has the scriptures give great care to doing that, to provide care and provision for them. And so where you would find that would be at home. He says, listen, if you've got kids at home, you're a widow, you've lost your husband, but you have kids and you have grandkids, they should be encouraged to provide for you. It's an art that we've lost these days. We tend to want to just shuttle our parents off to different places and let them be someone else's issue because we have a life to live kind of thing. And I don't mean to be cold about that. I just think that there's a lot that should be rethought about that, because the scriptures are all about esteeming the elderly, and especially the widow. And so this is what he's speaking of. And these aren't my ideas. I mean, if you don't like what's being said here, I mean, you can take it out on me personally, but really it's just scripture. And this is what we do at the Daily Dose. And so what he says is you honor your mom and dad. So if you've got your mama and or your grandmother and she's a widow and she has provisional needs, you take care of that. That's your job. If she and so whatever it means. In fact, he goes on to say, we looked at that verse 2. If if someone won't provide for their household, man, they're worse than pagans. Even the pagans take care of their parents. So you need to get after it. And so that was the first thing that we looked at. We talked about how the scriptures go over and over about not mistreating the widow, and what the scripture had to say about that, how God hears, right? If you mistreat the widow and they cry out to me, he says, I surely hear them. He talked about in Acts 6, they made special care for widows who were being left out of kind of daily distribution of food, which was the provision. The church has always cared for the underprivileged, and so this is what was going on. And then we came into verse 5, and we began to look at that Friday. The widow who is really in need and left all alone puts her hope in God. There's two types of widows: those who are really in need, and those who and cry out to God to meet those needs, and widows who just chase after sugar daddies or whatever, and that's kind of where it goes. And he goes, hey, listen, you take care of those that are crying out to God. But the widow, verse 7, give the people these instructions so that no one may be open to blame. Verse 8, right? We looked at this. Anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. So in all of that, we learned that there are that widows who have children at home and grandchildren should take care of them. Family, brothers, brother-in-laws, all of that should go into taking care of that. Then it doesn't create an overburden on the church. The church then is going to provide for those that can't do that. And he says there are two types of those widows. There are those who really aren't concerned about God. They're just going to get their needs met in the world. And it's not like we don't care about them. We want to steer them back to a pursuit of God. But we're not under command to have to meet their physical needs. They've chosen a different route, and so you let them go. But those who've been crying out to God day and night, we meet those needs. And then he says, he talks about, we looked at this Friday, about the special forces, right? Remember, no widow may be put on a list of widows unless she's over 60. So this looks like an office at this point. They have been faithful to their husband. They're well known for their good deeds, such as bringing up children, showing hospitality, washing the feet of the Lord's people, helping those in trouble, devoting herself to all kinds of good deeds. And so this was what we called what did we call it? Man, I'm lost here in my notes. The special forces, right? That's what we were calling them, the special forces. And so that's who they are. And what are they doing? Well, they're teaching the younger women about life, and they're showing hospitality, and they're doing good deeds, and they're to be honored. And we talked about that Friday. Today we move into a different topic where he's really going to drill down about younger widows. And so let's just look at the context, look at the text, and let it say what it says. He says, as for younger widows, do not put them on such a list. They don't belong in that special forces realm, the younger widows. Now, I don't know if he means 59 and under, or what he means by younger widows. I think he's speaking more generically, because he says, listen, you put them on a list, and the list meant, much like Anna, the priestess in Jesus' day, they made a devotion to serve God. It was almost like they made a covenant that I'm no longer going to search for a husband, but I'm going to be married in that sense to the ministry. And so this was those widows who were put on a list made this sacred oath that they were going to devote themselves their last days and years of life and the strength of them to serving others, not having a husband. And so he says, listen, but you put a younger widow on that list, and what's going to happen? Well, when their sensual desires overtake them, overcome their dedication to Christ, they want to marry, right? So he's saying they're going to violate verse 12, thus bring judgment on themselves because they've broken that first pledge. So he's saying, hey, listen, you can't put a younger woman on there, because though she may say, hey, I'm all in, she's still got that whole drive going on of having a husband and a companion and the sexual and sensual things that go along with that. And as her heart begins to carry her that way, she's going to then not fulfill the pledge that she had made, and that brings terrible destruction on her. So he's encouraging the younger women then, this is what he says, to get married. But now he goes on to say, and if they don't get married, besides, he says, verse 13, besides, they get into the habit of being idle and going about from house to house. And not only do they become idlers, but also busybodies who talk nonsense, say things they ought not to. Now, this paints a lot of women in a terrible light. But in some sense, we all can testify, right? The scriptures are very specific on the idea of an idle mind, and it being what we would call kind of the devil's workshop, so to speak. And so he says here, listen, don't put those young women on the list, because they're going to desire a husband, and her affections are going to be divided. And they also are going to stir up trouble. That's what's just going to happen. He says they're going to not be busy with their kids and their husband. You see, when in Titus, Paul told the older women that they should train the younger women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be workers at home, right? This is, women were built, and I'm not saying that some of you have chosen not to have babies, or you're outside of the realm, or don't want to get married. You're all free to do those things. But the general rule is that women, their highest and most noble responsibility is bearing children, raising those children in the fear and admonition of the Lord, loving their husbands, and providing the family, which was the first institution that God ever established. Adam and Eve, married, go be fruitful, multiply the earth. Right? This was the call of God, still is in that sense. And so he says, listen, but what happens is, he said, so when they become a widow, they should, if they're young enough, start over, go get after it. Because he says, here's what happens if you don't, and you have this time on your hands. You become idle, argos. That is, you become lazy, thoughtless, unprofitable. And we know that to be true. I mean, you see what happens, in a society like ours, where we pay people not to work, where we create these Section 8 housing places, and then there's disability, and there's welfare, and people have found a way where they don't have to work. That's where a lot of trouble happens in our society. It comes from those arenas. And so, and I'm being generic, but that is true. And so he says there's something about being idle. Let a man, in fact, Paul tells one of the churches, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life, work with your hands, right? Just be busy, doing good work and good deeds. And so idleness is a problem. That's why it's important that your kids, they have chores, all of these things. All of us have necessary work to do. The second thing he says is you end up moving in toward gossip, because if you're on that list, you're going around helping other people. Well, apparently the younger women would go around collecting information. And it would, the word phloros is the Greek word for gossip there. It literally means to bubble over. It means to boil over, that you're so full of information that it just bubbles over, and you begin to talk about other people. And so he says this is part of the problem. So women, go find a husband, go have babies, go take care of that. Unless if your hormones and all of that, you're still in that mode. After 60, apparently, Paul's going, hey, they kind of settle down. And then he speaks of the concept of busybody, right? Meddling, managing the affairs of another. Then they begin to want to tell other people how to run their life. And I don't know about you, but I'm not in favor of just having somebody else getting into all my business. And he's saying, hey, so all of that to say they should go get married and have babies. The Proverbs 31 woman that every woman loves to hate in some sense because it's that standard that's kind of unattainable, says in the scripture says this: watch over your household, not eating the bread of idleness. That's who that Proverbs 31 woman. She watches over her household. She's not eating the bread of idleness. She's busy doing things. She's busy buying and selling. She's busy making clothes. She's busy feeding her children. She's busy caring for her husband. She's doing all of those things. And so he then comes down in verse 14. He says, instead, he says, well, let me read the verse 13. We talked about it. Besides, they get in the habit of being idle and going about from house to house. And not only do they become idlers, but also busybodies who talk nonsense, saying things they ought not to. Verse 14. So I counsel younger widows to marry, have children, manage their homes, give the enemy no opportunity for slander. And he says some have already, in fact, turned away from Satan. So some of these widows, for whatever reason, begins to work into this idleness and all of these other things, and they just fall in line with Satan. I think that's probably in keeping with Paul saying, don't let the sun go down on your anger, lest you give Satan a foothold. Anger's not the only place that Satan is just looking for a foothold, some place to kind of crawl and get up on your back and ride you into destruction. Gossip, idleness, we've always said, right? Idleness is the devil's playground. Workshop, however you want to phrase it. And so this is what he's speaking of. And so he's saying, now listen, young women, young widows, just get married, have children, manage your home so that you're not just falling into the trap and snare of Satan. And so that's his admonition that we look at today. And so we're done with the widows, but what powerful truth, right? We should honor our widows, honor them, right? Family, kids, grandkids, brother, uncles, whoever it is, provide for those that are in your household that don't have a husband of their own. And then he says that with those other widows and they're older, put them on a list of special forces. Let them get after it. Let them show hospitality. Let them serve. They have no husband to serve, but they can serve the stranger. They may not have any children of their own that can provide for them, but they can go help younger women, and they can be about those things. And he says, and the younger ones, just go get married. Fulfill your purpose that God has for you. I love the fact that Paul wants to care and give oversight to women and to treat them as they should be, as vessels of honor. That's how the scriptures speak of weaker vessels that we should cherish. That's how women are seen in the scriptures, and that's the message for today. So, man, Lord bless you guys, and looking forward to what goes on in my day. I hope you do as well. And man, Lord willing, I'm going to see you in the morning. We're going to keep rocking through the book of 1 Timothy. Love you guys. Have a great day.